try not to be sarcastic.
Madam Mayor.
I've had a lot of caffeine today.
Madame.
Does she say that every meeting?
She's just,
Last meeting?
she's playing.
Madam Mayor.
She's playing
Oh, I missed that one.
Madam
my
Mayor.
emotions.
Someone needs to catch me up.
So if we're addressing, address as Madam Mayor, and
Absolutely.
then we'll be good to go.
You got it?
Just be sure and flex when you get the.
I need her to be on my left side, right side down.
Okay, it says record, Rachel.
You just get your one of them to. Yeah, I did that. Good, see, their names are.
The titles are not that important. Rachel.
And I love you too. Madam Mayor, did you get the recording on? Yes.
Okay, Amy, will you do a call to order, roll call, and establish a quorum for the City of Perkins special meeting?
Yes. Mayor?
Yes.
Sarah Rebello is absent. Sarah? Yes. Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
And Justin.
Yes.
Will you pray with me, please? Father in heaven, we come to you now. We just praise your name for us being able to be together and to meet. Father, I ask that you would continue to protect our city. I want to thank you for our city staff and what they've done during our storms. Thank you for D&D service. Father, I pray you continue to protect our first responders. And I thank you and praise your name for our city staff. And I pray a hedge of protection over them and their families and the commissioners. Father, I ask that you would guide and direct us tonight. May you grant us again wisdom and discernment as we make decisions for the city and as we learn. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Join me in pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's our country. Okay. Thank you. Number 4. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to approve purchase order number 2307562 to Steve Myers in the amount of $28,500.
So at our last meeting, at your last meeting, you approved the purchase, but our code says that you have to approve the purchase order, and somebody forgot to put the purchase order on the
Not a
agenda.
problem.
This is the second week in a row that someone has fallen on the sword. That was me last week, David.
So we're just approving the purchase order for the purchase that you already approved, which was included in the capital improvement plan and in the budget.
Commissioners, do you have anything?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase order 2307562 to Steve Myers in the amount of $28,500.
I second it.
You go, Madam Mayor.
Well, Sarah Rebello's not here.
Mayor?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
Justin?
Yes, ma'am.
Good to go. Number 5, presentation, training, and discussion necessary for participation in the Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, OMAG, recognition program.
Okay, the first time that we did this, none of you were on the commission.
You were?
The
He
first-
was.
Were you at the first meeting? Did you do the stability test? Oh, I was telling David, I didn't think, I thought you came after that. So you have done the stability test. Okay, my apologies. But you've all, well, I take it back, and only Justin and Carla have even met David, because then he came back and did a second training at our request. He is one of the, in my life, he is one of 2 to 3 gurus who I call for municipal law advice. He represents different cities, Manford, Sand Springs, and his hometown, Arcoma. I never get it right. And he also works, his passion is training commissions and councils. And so he works with OMAG, which is our insurance company, to conduct trainings such as this. One thing that I just realized this. We didn't even ask you if you wanted to do this year. We did last year. We asked the commission. Last year was the first time that we went through this recognition program. And it was much more difficult, as Justin may remember, because it involved adopting the handbook that 3 of you received when you came on. It didn't just involve adopting, it involved creating it, basically. And I wanted to show you something. One of the things that David gave me last year was the handbook for City of Sand Springs. And he also gave us all of the sections in this book in Word. We used a lot of them for the books that you have before you. Some of them don't apply to Perkins, and others are still on the list of to be done or considered at a future date. But this is an example of his work, and many of these policies, the Code of Ethics, I think, I don't know if this is true, but the rest of the world attributes that to you, and we've all stolen it pretty much over the last, how many years? 15 years?
15 years.
Maybe. So you guys are privileged, I think, to have David come talk with you and train with you. The reason that he's here, though, one of the thing that I didn't ask if you wanted to do is the OMAG recognition program, okay? OMAG is our insurance company. They've realized that the better trained you are, and the better trained I am, the better trained Rachel is, and probably even, are they doing some city manager training?
Yes.
City managers. The better trained city officials are, the fewer lawsuits they're going to get. So they're investing money in training, and the carrot is that if you do this program, which involves this training, completing the stability test that you'll do tonight, reviewing the insurance policy, which we'll do next meeting, and reviewing the handbook, which we'll do next meeting, then they will write us a check.
Maybe. Not sure they're doing that after July 1. It may have changed.
Really?
On the payment.
The amount
The
of
program,
it, or payment at all?
payment, and we can talk about how
Oh,
and why.
I didn't
You
even
have to do it
know.
without getting paid.
Well, last year I said they're gonna pay us
did
this
last year.
much, and it was wrong, and then it kept going down,
And
so
hopefully
they did pay us.
it.
Yeah, $2,600 last year.
Yeah.
How much?
2,600.
And that
So
paid
we-
for the training that we went through with strategic planning?
No. But it paid a piece of it, so that
It
was
paid
good.
of
A portion of it.
Every $2,600 is good.
So never mind, you may or may not get money for it, but you'll be better trained, and you'll have gotten to work with David. And I just think the stability test is really good because it helps you figure out where you are in your opinions of your city.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to David.
Good. You left out one part of the background and history of why we do this. I'm the most selfish person you will ever meet. Because,
That's so not true.
no, it is. I started this training because I started as a city attorney in 1988, and when I started, I worked for one city alone for 10 years. And that one city was very difficult because it was like riding a roller coaster. It would be great for a while, and then it would be horrible for a while. And I became serious about studying why. Why is this happening? 10 years into my career as a city attorney, I was hired to represent a second city, and I didn't think it was possible that a city could be dysfunctional 100% of the time, but they were. It was the worst functioning city government in the history of Oklahoma, in every way you can imagine. And again, being a very selfish person, I didn't enjoy that much, and I figured out real quickly, and you're gonna see in the handout, we took lots of surveys of elected officials. I did. I got curious, why does this happen in government? And it really, a light bulb came on in 2002 when I started representing Sand Springs, because it was the opposite. For 50 years, they've been the most stable government in Oklahoma. They are extremely well managed financially and have been for 50 years. They make good decisions, they have good elected officials, and it was that way when I started there. And my question to them became, why is it that way here? And why is it different in other places we go? And I became very selfish I think I can make these other places more like Sand Springs. Because they should be. Because what we find is if we are well-trained and operate the correct way, good elected officials will stay. If we don't do it that way, good ones will go away. And the same thing on the staff side. Good city employees will leave if they work in a bad environment. And all of us really, in a very selfish way, want to accomplish something for our city, don't we? We want to make a positive difference over time, and all we need to do is know how to do it. Most of the time, good people get elected, and good people work for the city and want to accomplish good things. Over that time, I've worked with the single most dishonest person I've known in my life, who was a councilman. So I've learned from some very bad experiences. I worked with about a 5-year period with a 3-2 vote about everything on the agenda, including whether we should adjourn. We would have 3-2 votes. Worked with an elected official in which, only once, in which I had contact with both the OSBI and FBI about their activity. Everything you could imagine that could go wrong. So some of this, again, all of it, is directed by being the most selfish person you're going to meet. Over time, I became convinced we can train out of it, and I contracted with OMAG about 15 years ago, and we started doing some training. The first 2 places I went were actually before contracting with OMAG. I went to Haskell, Oklahoma, which is about 2,000 people or less, and Enid. Within about a month, I created the training program, and they asked me to go to those 2 cities. I wasn't under contract with OMAG, but after those 2, I thought, this is universal. It should apply to everyone, because the message is very similar. We've now been to about 250 different cities around the state, and it's been interesting. We have seen some of the worst government you can imagine, and most of the time we go places and are enlightened by seeing something that we didn't think was possible, that cities are really doing some great work. So I'm glad you're here, glad you're willing to participate. It's good to have been here before. As a part of the training, a couple of things have come out of it. When we started, a couple of cities in Oklahoma had handbooks, the 2 I'd created, Sand Springs being one of them. We've now had that handbook or a version of it for at least 15 years. We started it there. It's grown to this. This is a 15 years worth of work. We review it annually, we change it, we add to it, we engage. We, being city council, approves it. I don't. But we update it annually, and I'll give you a good example. We, a year ago, had a lot of discussion with our city council about what's going on around the state and other cities. What are the pitfalls cities are falling into? And we saw in some cities, they're very hung up in national political debates, and it overwhelms the council. Everybody's got to pick a side, has really nothing to do with running a city. So we added to our handbook, we will not have agenda items to take a political stand on national political issues. And they wanted to do that before their last round of elections in case one extreme or the other got elected, and wanted to make us a political city so that we could stay stable over time. And that was council's doing. But there's no point in the city taking a stand on some of those national political issues. We're here to provide utilities, public safety, do the things that should be done. And what we know has happened, both in Oklahoma and around the country, is when cities get caught up in those issues, there's no getting out of it. And you're going to get branded one side or the other, and the other side's going to get more engaged, and it never ends. And you don't focus on what you should be focusing on. So that's an example of how we use it. The stability test was created as a part of that. Again, being selfish, I leaned on a lot of city clerks and city attorneys and city managers to help identify 10 areas of government that we think we should identify as how we should measure how we're doing. So that's how it came about, to ask that. And we think, having given this test in 250 cities now, I still think it's the right topics to ask you to evaluate how your city's doing. And we use the test in Sand Springs in a very simple way. We have 4 quarterly planning sessions a year that are regular meetings. They're on a regular meeting schedule. They're lunch meetings. And for each of those, we pick one of these 10 topics as a component of that work session. Just had one last week, and the topic was finance. Our auditor was at the meeting. Frank Crawford was available by Zoom. And we had a good discussion of how the city's doing financially in a lot of detail, so council could understand that. And that's one of the topics we do every year or two, because we rotate amongst these 10 topics unless there's something else that's just pressing. So that's kind of some background and history that I hope helps. Let's take the test first. You didn't know you were going to get a test, but you got a free pen from OMAG. You have 10 questions.
I do have a question for you.
Sure.
When it asks the question, how long have you been with the city, is that as a citizen total or just?
Elected or employee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And Amy, you were supposed to do one too.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
She's,
Okay.
and you're back just in time to do the test. So the first question on the test is, how are you doing financially as a city? This test is first because it's the most important. I probably used this example when I was here before, but it will do the new ones some good to hear it. One of the reasons I like giving this test is I gave it in a city larger than Perkins, and a councilman raised his hand and said, I have no idea how our city's doing financially. I've only been on the council 15 years, and I've never once seen a financial report for my city. And he was completely honest and truthful. And that's a problem around the state. There is no mandatory requirement of what you get on the finances of the city. You are the board of directors for the organization, and you've got to understand the money. So you're going to give a score 1 to 10. A 10 is you have a written policy that requires that you have reserves equal to at least 20% of your general fund budget, and you fully fund it. And you do that because you have a written policy that says so. A 1 is you're not sure you can pay payroll this month. So if you don't know, you don't know, but over time we need to know, and you need to know. So Rachel, how do you score on finances?
That's not fair because she's the financial
Oh,
director.
we're cheating on the test. She's the one who should know. How do you score it?
I gave us a 9 because there are things that I want to do, but we do have a budget policy. It does talk about restricted funds. We know exactly where all the money's coming from. We get monthly pages of stuff.
Good.
So I gave us a 9.
What financial reports do they get monthly?
They get the treasurer's report, a long-term debt report, a kind of a graphic image of where money stands and where revenues and expenses compared to last year.
Good.
They get a monthly sales tax report. They get a revenue report for year to date. They get an expense report for year to date. They get all of the credit card expenses and with descriptions of what every person's spent using their credit card, you know, $2.98 at Dollar General, like that. I feel like I'm leaving a page out.
Okay, good.
You also give us every single month the same piece of paper that tells us where the accounts are.
That's right, what the account, each checking
account is
account or
for.
savings account, what it is, what monies it is, and
The
then
description
and
of
then the June
what that
30th.
account is for.
Yep, and then the June 30th, the previous fiscal year, the end of year, what we had in there.
Good. We saw a financial report in one city that should have been written on a big chief tablet with crayon. It would have been better. It's better than the one that gave none. We also see the other extreme. There are some cities, some of our bigger cities will give a 300-page financial report to the elected officials monthly with no analysis. And there's a difference between a report and an analysis. They need the analysis, right? So sounds like you're doing it the way you should be doing it, and that's hopefully beneficial to you. It is a part of your job to understand the finances. And one of the problems we've seen around the state with elected officials is there's no one willing to say, this is what your job is, this is what is your business, and here are the things that are none of your business. but we shouldn't have any uncertainty about the finances of the city. It is your job. We did have a city within the last year for the municipal authority approve a resolution to file bankruptcy. And we have multiple cities that are near broke. And if we talk about how to define your success as a board of directors for the corporation, getting to that point would not be success, right? We want to be financially stable. And the reason is you'll make better decisions. Your decisions will be easier. If you understand the money, your job gets easier. Okay? So that's question number one. Question number two is we ask you to evaluate the governing body. A high score is we have good people who want to serve. They look forward to the business of the city. They have good intentions. They mean what's best for our community. A low score is you look around and say, I wish we could throw them all out and start over. And we've been in cities in which everyone sitting up there wrote down a 1. And that's a problem because you need to evaluate how you're performing as a board of directors. And hopefully, and I am convinced, good boards attract good people. Bad boards attract bad people. And they perpetuate themselves. And what that tells us is that you have a lot of responsibility to perform well in your job for the long-term benefit of the city. You just do. That's one of the responsibilities that comes with the job, isn't it? You probably have seen some of that. Sometimes we have the wrong people get elected. But I really think what you can do to make your city better is to serve in your position well. Have you ever seen a bad board member over your tenure? Probably. We all have, haven't we? Sometimes the wrong person gets elected, and we just have to deal with it. But you'll see in some of the written materials, the board responsibility is yours. It's not theirs. It's not your city manager's. City manager is not the referee when when two of you disagree. Can't be. It starts with the mayor. It's the mayor's job to make sure
Told me that last time.
Yeah.
I heard it.
You heard it. Took it seriously too, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I was like a month into the job. I was like, oh, I got you. At least I'll try to.
We know what happens if the city manager tries to solve it, or the city clerk, or the city attorney, right? They usually end up unemployed because you can't solve it. Don't have any authority to. Question number 3, how are your city council meetings other than this one? High scores should be enjoyable. You look forward to attending. You're doing good work for the city. You hope you never miss one. Low score is they're miserable. I hope I never go to another one.
Amy, stop.
Okay? You know, we once did a survey in the Tulsa area of what cities did to make their meetings more enjoyable, and that's when we discovered that in Jinx, they provided food and snacks at their meetings. So some of the cities have copied that just because they were trying to find a way to make it a more enjoyable process. Part of staff's job is to make it an enjoyable process to serve on the city council. That should be a part of it, shouldn't it?
He didn't have time tonight. We just got
Our
back.
husband makes
Yeah.
the best brownies and cookies.
He makes brownies and cookies for every meeting.
Question number 4, how's the workforce of the city? As a board of directors for a municipal corporation, you should want it to be a good place to work. It used to, years ago, it was an honor to work for government. It hasn't been that way for a while. It is extremely difficult working for a city. There are a lot of people who don't like us for some reason.
I don't like anyone in charge.
Right? You hear it every day, don't you?
Every single day.
Yeah. So a part of your challenge is to make it a good place to work. It's hard to evaluate the workforce in a city with your number of employees, but a high score is it's a good place to work. We attract and retain good people. Low score is that city that just has constant turnover and can't attract or keep anyone because they don't pay very well, and it's not a good place to work.
So what if you're you're actively in the process of retaining people by making things better?
That's good.
I mean, and I truly,
That's a sign that you've taken it seriously and you're looking at making it better over time.
I honestly feel that people are starting to see that this team up here is actively that team down there is actively trying to retain people and keep the best of the best. And by making a positive work environment and by the commission knowing their role
Right,
and staying out of the way of what's not their role.
right.
I hope that's the case at this point. But, I mean, I see our staff working hard. I mean, we all live within the city, and where I live, it's, staff is driving by all the time because of my location, and it's just like, I know how hard they're working.
Yeah.
And I want the people of Perkins to realize how hard they're working. Are they perfect? Is anyone perfect? No. But the effort that's given needs to be recognized.
You know, I had a councilman this last year, when we got to this topic, they had a new city manager who just started, and he said his expectation with employees was that they would never have another employment issue or bad behavior by a city employee, and this is a city of 15,000. And I said, oh, well, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you can hope that, but the expectation should be that the staff will deal with the bad employees, and you won't have to because it's none of your business. And you will have bad behavior of employees because every city will. It's just gonna happen. But that doesn't mean it's her fault or the city manager's fault or the attorney's fault. It's human nature.
It's that human being.
It's gonna happen.
Work life, that's just.
It just is.
Going to happen.
It happens in the private sector, it happens every place. The question is, how are we gonna deal with it? Do we have policies in place to deal with it, and are we gonna attack it in the right way? And you've gotta have a good management. The best way your manager's gonna be able to deal with it is having the confidence to deal with it and not having 5 people second guessing it, right? I mean, isn't it? It's much harder to deal with it when the manager says, I know, and I don't know your manager well, but I know from experience elsewhere, if it's the manager who's afraid of how 5 elected officials are gonna respond to how they dealt with an employee, they're gonna make a worse decision instead of figuring out what's right and doing it.
It's called trusting the person that you hired to be your city manager,
It is.
knowing your role.
Question number 5 is public image. What does the public think of the city? What does the public expect of you? And I think that answer is clear and we ignore it sometimes. They expect you to be competent, they expect you to show up, and they expect you to be civil to each other. And I think if you do those things, public confidence will grow. And that shouldn't be hard, should it? It is for some places, it is for some people. What's the public image of the city? High score is that city in which there's a lot of confidence in the government to deal with things like windstorms where limbs are down, because that's who they're gonna call, right? I know a city that when the wind, I noticed you have some too, windstorm happens at midnight, by 8 a.m. Sunday morning, Father's Day, they were getting complaints the limbs hadn't been picked up yet. Is that amazing? Yeah, by 8 on Sunday morning, you're already getting citizens who are, how do they counter that with, boy, we don't trust government to do anything? Well, who did they call, right?
Really want to know?
Yeah.
Rationale.
It's just interesting. Public image, I think, is a measure of confidence. How confident is the public in your ability to deal with a crisis and be ready? And then second, how do we create a positive momentum for what we're trying to accomplish? And I think some of that comes from having very clear goals of what you're doing and some measure of success. And if you do that, it will perpetuate itself. And really, a lot of times, public image is a low score because board members are helping make it a low score. You've got to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Number 6 is crisis management. Government exists to deal with those things that go wrong. So how well prepared is your city when there's a crisis? Do you have budget policies in place? Do you have the money to deal with picking up the limbs and dealing with it, and ability to get contractors to do it? How well prepared are you in a crisis? Because that's why government exists. A high score is we're ready, we can deal with those things. Low score is that city that says we have no idea what we need to do. Okay. Number 7 is economic development. It's an interesting one that would not have been on the test decades ago because cities weren't involved in economic development. Now they are. And some places are very aggressive and very active, some aren't. So the question is, how active is your city as an organization in economic development projects? A high score is we're very active, we think we can make a difference, we think it's a part of what city government should be doing. Low score is we've opted out of that, we let others deal with it. And we have some cities that just do that. So give a score of how you're doing in economic development. I've left Tammy a video about Broken Bow, and hopefully she'll get a chance to screen it and see if it's worthy of some of you seeing it. It is an interesting approach the city of Broken Bow has taken. If you make it to southeast Oklahoma, go drive downtown Broken Bow. And there's some pictures in your book that will show what it looked like just 3 or 4 years ago.
Did you say Broken Bow?
Broken Bow. It was dead and dilapidated not long ago.
I just left Ho Chi Town.
Oh, did you go south, further south to Broken Bow?
Yeah, we went through Broken Bow. Ho Chi Town has their very first mayor.
Yeah,
She emailed me today.
Newtown.
I'd like to have a conversation because Broken Bow wanted to annex them.
Right.
So I think they're currently in a lawsuit.
I think it's been resolved. I think Ho Chi Town's been incorporated.
Yeah, it's at the end, it's at the tail end of it.
Yeah.
being handled. But Broken Bow and Ho Chi Town have just like boom.
Yeah.
And it's both the city and the town are thriving.
It is interesting. And
It's-
Ho Chi Town's been booming for several years now.
It was like people like myself shouldn't have talked about it so much. 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't that much and you could just drive straight through, but it's bumper to bumper, 2 miles on both directions going through.
Broken Bow's found a way to capitalize on it, and their way to capitalize on it was, when they had a dilapidated downtown, was to buy it. They started buying downtown buildings, tearing them down, offering them for sale. It's now at 100% occupancy
And
in a short amount of time.
Ho Chi Town is working now on getting a post office. So right now, the addresses are still a Broken Bow address.
Yeah, Ho Chi Town's going to be interesting to watch. It's our newest city. I think just within the last year they've been incorporated. Before it was Carlton Landing, and that's another interesting. Have you been there?
No, but I see it on reports all the time. And yeah,
It's on Lake Eufaula, just south of city of Eufaula. It is a planned community by a number of wealthy people in the Oklahoma City area who wanted to build their own city. And it's maybe 10 years old, and it is fascinating to go to Carlton Landing. Very upscale, $1 million homes, but now lots of them.
Apparently, the new mayor for Ho Chi Town, she was one of the biggest proponents for obtaining the annex. She lived in the area most of her life, and so I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her and learning from what she's been through.
It's going to be
To
interesting.
bring people into their community.
Yeah, because they've got to create sales tax and a base of how they operate as a city. It would be interesting to see how you start from nothing. I've been told they will generate $1 million a month in sales tax once they get their sales tax in place,
Really?
just because of the retailers who are already there.
They really are already there.
They're already there, they just were in unincorporated areas.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's interesting to see,
County's not happy.
yeah,
Who's not?
county.
County?
I, as a mayor, I'm just like so happy for them. As a person that was my escape, I'm like, it's too crowded here. But it's a good problem that they've.
It's going to be interesting because they're going to have the struggle of all of those people who moved there who did not want to be regulated in what they do. They have very upscale restaurant bar type areas with dirt parking lots, for example.
Correct.
No paving requirements, no fire code. They have $1 million cabins on dirt roads. You couldn't get a fire truck to it if you had to.
You can't get a motorcycle down it.
Yeah,
We had to trailer so that, and then we had to go to a parking lot of a local business just to unload our motorcycles.
so isn't it interesting what's been built on dirt roads? And
Because
anyway,
it's county.
Question number 8 is how well do you plan and set goals as an organization? So give a score on that. A part of your job is to figure out what you want Perkins to be in 10 years. And you are the people who have been entrusted by the public to figure that out. Everyone in town can have an opinion, but yours is going to matter because you're going to allocate resources in budgeting, and you're going to set goals, and you're going to determine what the priorities are. Just as Broken Bow decided a priority was the rebuild downtown, you're going to figure out what it is that's appropriate for here, whatever that is. Some of that is infrastructure. We have a number of cities who have not upgraded water and sewer facilities for decades, and someone new gets elected and they're burdened by having to fix it. But it's got to be fixed. All of those things will make a difference in how you operate as a city over time. Question number 9 is administration. It's not directed at city manager entirely. It's directed at the upper management of the city. How stable has management been? High score is we attract and retain very good management in our upper management positions because we know that stable management over time will lead to greater results. Low score is that city that just has constant turnover in upper management. We've been in cities that we've been in a city that had 8 city managers in 2 years. I get to go there for training and ask, are you that bad at hiring, or is there something else wrong? There's another one that I won't name the city, but I think it's the greatest wasted opportunity we've seen in Oklahoma in decades. They've been through now, I believe, 6 in 2 years. They also didn't approve their budget before June 30. I don't know what happens when you don't approve a budget, but they couldn't agree on approving a budget. So I think there are other issues other than we've seen that. There is another county seat size city that's now been through 6 city managers in 8 years, some of them very good hires who just didn't survive. And again, something else is wrong if you've got that. We've done some videos about cities that have been very successful. There's one we have not yet done that we need to, and that's the story of Jinx. And some of you may have been to the aquarium at Jinx. I wish, and we will. We're going to get a video history of Jinx, and it's not a city I've done work for regularly, but it's one of the cities in the Tulsa area we've watched all this time and said, why can't we do things like they did it? There's an interesting component to Jinx. 35 years ago, they were about 5,000 population. They're now 25,000. They had the same city manager for 30 years. 30 years. What a model of stability. Their city council functioned as a board of directors. They set a goal to be a city that their school system and football team could be proud of. That really was what they were trying to accomplish. We've got on tape former city manager and Mayor Mike Tinker talking about how that was their goal in the early years. It was an embarrassment to be with the city because the school has been so successful. They had to catch up. If you were to look at their audit today, you would see they have about $50 million in the bank. They are extremely financially successful. Did they build a world-class aquarium by accident or because somebody sat down 30 years ago and said, here's what we should try to accomplish? All of it was very hard work. I talked to their retired city manager just last week, and he reminded me they had as much animosity over the turnpike that goes through South Tulsa, the Creek Turnpike, as any other project anyone's ever had. They had protests at City Hall. They had threats of recall. If they tried to take it away now, they'd get the same reaction, wouldn't they? Isn't that interesting? The public was equally divided on building a turnpike. Well, now they're getting a new outlet mall that's being built because they have a turnpike. Anyway, it's an interesting history, and I think we should look and learn from how those other cities have done things. They did planning and goal setting and its stable administration extremely well for a long period of time. And that equaled success. And I think that's a real simple lesson for all of us. Question number 10 is how well do we communicate as a group? Are you getting the information you need to make the decisions that come before you? So that's The 10th question, and high score is you're getting the right information. Low score is wish somebody would let me know what's going on around here. Okay? We'll gather those and get a composite score back to you. I think we had from the first time we were here, your previous score is in here at a 69, I believe. Does that sound right?
Calculate.
You can. We'll get it back to you later if you want. Statewide average is a 71. The highest we've seen for other cities is usually low 90s. Questions about the test while you gather those?
Yeah, I'll gather them, but would anybody prefer to get the results later and not have me calculating and looking at your sheet?
I don't care. You can do it now if you want. We
Or
can publish
have Amy
mine.
do it if you'd rather have her look at it? Okay. You okay? You looking at it?
Any questions about the test? I think it's an important process you can do annually if we take it in the spirit it is intended. It is intended to evaluate, not to judge. And if we think of it that way, we're doing a self-evaluation of how we're doing with the idea we're going to work at getting better, whatever that is. So, Tamara will.
Go ahead.
So, back to the other topics. Justin, you've been serving several years now. What do you think about it?
I think it's greatly improved from what it was when I first got in.
Did you know Jason before he got elected?
Didn't know anybody.
Really? What did you learn in your early part of doing this that would be beneficial to him? Anything that stands out?
What's greatly improved is how the commissioners work together. What it has in the past, I didn't like it at all, how we worked together, and what seemed was backstabbing. And I think now it's very good.
Best analogy I've heard is one that came from Mike Nunley, who died a couple of years ago. He was our city manager in Manford, and he said city council is kind of like a basketball team. There are 5 of you. And with those 5, if you play as a team, you can be successful. But when you've got 1 or 2 who decide they're going to do their own thing, it gets very hard, isn't it? And all of us have played some sport or been involved in some activity where you have that one person who's not very coachable and thinks they can just do it their way. And they may score a lot of points and you get beat and they think it was a success, right? We've seen that. And it's kind of important to be a good teammate, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Isn't it, I invited a new mayor to our meeting in Manford last month. He was brand new and he said, I don't know what to do to be mayor. And I said, well, come to a Manford meeting with me and tell me what you think. And he came and sat in the back, and after it was over, he said, I want to accomplish the one thing they've accomplished. A sense of teamwork. It is enjoyable. It is clear everyone in the room liked each other. And they sure made better decisions because of all of that. Because they could talk amongst themselves. It wasn't a debate. There was no tension. And it was an enjoyable process. And I bet there was some of that when you started, wasn't
Yes,
there?
the tension, there's no tension anymore. That is great.
It is great to get to that point, isn't it? How do you sustain it over time?
You keep communication, keep working as a team.
Recognize it and work toward it. And it becomes a part of your job, the 5 of you. It will be a part of your job to make sure you sustain that. And I'm convinced from the Sand Springs model, you can sustain it over a long period of time. And I don't think that part, no different than building an aquarium, that part is not something that happens by accident. It happens on purpose because people like you who say, this is an important part of what we do. And we're going to keep it that way. Our mayor in Manford, who's been there about 15 years, he's probably 45, so he's like 30 when he became mayor. He will say his single greatest success was building a team. It's not getting a new grocery store or building a new city hall or any of these other things that others would look at and say, boy, you got those things done, you will say building a team is why those other things happen. They wouldn't have been possible without that. So that's good point, isn't it? Hopefully everyone sees the importance of sustaining it. Jason, what made you interested in doing this? Were you elected or appointed?
I was appointed.
What made you think, boy, that's a good idea?
I want to make a difference.
Yeah.
Perkins is growing. It's, my family's here, I'm here, we've put down roots. I wanted it to grow the right way and be successful.
Yeah. I think it's important to recognize what success, and it's just what Justin said, success for you as a group is working well together because you'll make better decisions. All of those other things will be easier, whatever that is, if you work well together. It probably causes some people to cringe, but I like to use the example in Sand Springs. We had the very difficult mask issue that a lot of other cities dealt with, and whether you were for it or against it, they were unanimous in approving it, unanimous in removing it. And it happened for a real simple reason, not because they all agreed. It was because they had a high level of respect for each other. They knew that if it was a split vote, it would just add fuel to the fire of, boy, some are on the right side, some are on the wrong side, and they wanted to be uniform together. I really am convinced that mutual respect is why they came to those conclusions together. And none of it was easy. Either way, no matter what any city did, it wasn't easy. But it's interesting on the dynamic of how a group works well together, and I just think it's important if you want to be successful in what you do. You have no power by yourself. It's really that simple. And I've used this example before at Mayor early on when I first started in Sand Springs, and I asked, why do you white guys work so well? That was his answer. We have a lot of respect for each other. And that he was told when he first got elected, if you don't respect someone else's vote, yours will become meaningless. And he had taught that ever since. Tamara and others give me credit for some of this, but I really am selfish and I stole it from others. I've been interested in how we sustain it and understanding how they got to that point and reinforcing the need to sustain it. That becomes your job. It really is an important part of what you need to do. Mayor, you've been mayor a couple of years. What's the good and bad of being mayor?
It's been about a year and a half. The good?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm really proud of this team.
Yeah.
You know, when Commissioner Henniger doesn't say very much, but when he does, we all listen. Like, he's just a man of, he's paying attention and he knows what's going on, and when he speaks, we're like,
Better pay attention, right?
Vice Mayor Robello, who's not here tonight, she is so smart and she's great with words, and I literally love coming to meetings and watching Robello and Cox see who can be the quickest to second something. Jason, I've known Jason for a very long time, and I love how he cares for this city. He literally has a heart for what's best for our city. He's got 3 dogs in the fight because he's got 3 daughters that are in the school system, and he's grounded here. I mean, his wife works from home and he drives to Stillwater, and he could live anywhere, but he's chosen to put roots down here, and he's chosen to put his neck on the line
And be in it for the long haul.
be in it. You know, he didn't want to have to be in an election, but he would have.
Yeah.
Same for Commissioner Dickerson. she's a toughie, but she has a heart of gold. She's got 2 dogs in the fight. He does too. So does Rebello. But I'm just gonna say something, okay? So you just deal with it. She doesn't think she's qualified, but I don't think I'm qualified.
None of us are.
None of us do.
I feel like I went through an election, and sometimes people ask me why I did this, and I'm like, I don't know. You're gonna have to ask the big guy upstairs. But Sarah doesn't feel like she's qualified. I said, well, neither am I. I'm a physical education teacher, and we're all here because we care. And the mayor's a little sarcastic, so is some of the commissioners. But we show respect for each other. I feel like we just show so much respect for each other that before any motion is ever made, we listen to each other.
That by itself makes you qualified.
There's
Because
been,
we have some who won't do that.
there's been
No, I
so
did this
many times-
training in a city that is a 25,000 population. Board members wouldn't sit near each other. 2 sat in opposite corners in the back of the room because they weren't speaking to each other. We went there 4 different times for training, and it was a failure each time. They scored a failing score. They judged themselves as a failing score. So who's qualified? You guys are qualified. They're not. One of them had a PhD and was a former school superintendent. Is he qualified? No. Because he couldn't get along with anybody.
So
You don't have to like
I'm not-
everyone you sit with,
Right.
but you have to have the respect in order to do the business that needs to be done for the betterment of what you're doing.
And you have to know how to disagree with each other.
Right.
There will come a time that some of you will disagree, and that's fine. The mayor I told you that said he was taught to respect everyone else's vote, there came a time he got voted out as mayor with a 4-3 vote and was elected vice mayor with a 4-3 vote. In the next meeting, you would have thought he and the mayor were brothers. He became mayor again after that at some point, but so much respect that he was something he took extremely personal. He got voted out as mayor with a 4-3 vote.
I have.
And
Okay, go
it
ahead.
doesn't change the attitude of how I'm going to get along with people, because that's more important than whether he was mayor or not. Right? And you're going to have an issue that comes up that you're going to have a 3-2 vote on, hopefully not whether to adjourn or something like that. But
It's unanimous.
we don't vote on adjourning anymore in my cities because there's nothing left on the agenda, there's nothing to vote on.
We do because it quiets them down. And then they can move on to the next
I got
agenda.
tired of the split votes. Again, I was very selfish about it.
I get to have a split vote on adjournment.
I can't tell you how many times I've sat up here and listened and gave each commissioner an opportunity to speak, and I've changed my mind.
Yeah,
And I've.
it's a sign of respect too,
And I've
isn't
given them
it? That you will
credit
listen.
for. I see that in a different light now. I get that. I see that. And, I might say something that might be controversial, but I actually really don't care. I don't think God always calls the qualified, but he qualifies the called. And that's what I try to hang on to. And so the good and the bad and the ugly, you know what? Sometimes the hard part is being visible in the community, and it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting explaining city government. I'm not in charge of the city people. I'm a part of a team.
Right.
Call up, or that might be there's really not any negatives that I've ran into yet, except for, there's a lot of studying and there's a lot of learning, and there's definitely a learning curve. And I think the staff has realized now that if me or we ask a question, we're not questioning what they've done. We're asking the questions so that we have a better understanding, so that we can make the right decision. I think that has gone away, maybe.
Has it?
Yes.
Good.
So,
That's an important achievement, isn't it? Because you didn't always have that.
for example, today I needed to come into City Hall for something, and And I stood there and waited, and there was a citizen there that had no clue who I was, and that's fine. And then another staff member came out and said I had a meeting with Rachel. She's like, well, why didn't you just come back? And I said, it's not my place. I'll tell you I'm here. And she's like, you've got to. I was like, I know my role, and I'm not going to interfere with what staff is doing until they invite me. So I think with all of us, there's such a level of respect for our staff. And I think I'm speaking for myself right now, I have such a level of respect for Bob and what Rachel does and what Amy does and what Amy does, that they communicate with us so well, very well. We're not out of the loop on anything. And I'm sure it's probably exhausting for our city manager to talk to each of us individually, but he does.
You'll see in the handout, the most exhausting thing for a city manager is having to deal with boards that don't get along with each other. It's the hardest issue for staff. Harder than budgeting, harder than anything else they deal with. We did a survey of 100 city managers at the city manager conference and asked them what's their most difficult issue. And it was board members who don't get along with each other.
I had a fellow director in my field tell me one time, he said the job would be easy if it wasn't for the people.
Yeah. Exactly. So Sarah, how long have you served now? Since April? What do you think about it?
It's interesting. Glad I did it.
What's the most surprising thing about it? Most different than what you expected?
I don't think I expected anything, because I just came in with a clean slate and was here to learn and be part of.
What's been the hardest part? Do you think it just stands out?
Learning the financial end of it. It can be very confusing. How some of the budgets work, it's all very just mind-boggling.
It's complex, it's difficult. I still have debates with finance directors about what does this really mean? What do you mean we can't do this? It is a complex area, it just is. Cities are the most regulated organizations in the state by everyone. Auditors have silly rules, CPAs use lingo we don't understand, right? I mean, and then you've got to translate it for 5 different people with 5 different backgrounds who need to understand it because they have to. It is hard. We feel your pain.
It's complex, and a lot of people probably think it's hard. I don't think that way. I come in and say, I don't really understand this. I'm gonna go ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to pick on you, but there is a survey result, and it's on, it'll say page 20, mistakes by first-time elected officials. It'll say either page 10 or 20 or both. More than halfway through.
20.
20 mistakes by first-time elected officials. And these are questions that were asked of elected officials. What mistakes do new people get, who get elected make? Trying to be everything to everyone. Too one-dimensional or one-issue driven. We sometimes see some who get elected with, I'm going to solve this one problem and that's it. New person gets all the calls from those who have tried to get something at City Hall and been told no, so they start over with the new person. There's usually a reason they've been told no. I don't know if you've had that experience yet, but that's not unusual. Jason, have you had that? Boy, I'm glad you got elected. Let me tell you what problem we've got with City Hall. That's a common response. Coming in with an agenda without learning first, overstepping limits of responsibility, prejudging issues, and not realizing there's a large silent majority. Don't just listen to the mob that shows up.
Social media.
Or social media. Best advice, the next page for elected officials. Again, all of these are from surveys of elected officials. Understand the problems of cities are expensive, sometimes difficult to solve, may take a long time. Some decisions will be difficult. You see the one below, zoning and land use is one of the most difficult decisions you will make. There's no helping you. It's not one you can delegate to someone else. You will have a land use issue in which a bunch of residents are against something and a developer who has a lot of money at stake is in favor of it. And you're gonna have to pick one or the other. And there may or may not be a clear right answer. Hopefully there's guidance from the comprehensive plan and there's a staff recommendation, but it's gonna be your decision. And you may not all agree. We are seeing more and more contentious issues on land use. And this survey's from 10 years ago. It still, I'm sure would be, we looked at this with a group not long ago and they said, I think that number would be 20% higher now than it was 10 years ago.
Which part would be 20% higher?
Zoning and land use being the most difficult issue for elected officials.
We've already had to
Yeah.
face that.
Most difficult elected officials, the one who doesn't trust staff. That's from 100 city managers, 46%, so that's the most difficult elected official they deal with when there's a low level of trust. It's just interesting that that comes up so much. Turn back a couple pages, it's the page right before the broken bow pictures. I think it's important to go over what your responsibilities are versus staff responsibilities. It just says elected officials and responsibilities. Policing your own membership, having good meetings. I go to lots of places and they'll score a 1 on meetings and I usually ask them, why do you keep doing it that way? That is one that is 100% within your control. You can have good meetings if you choose to, or you can choose to keep having bad meetings.
David, that was the low score by far last year, and I think that's changed.
Yeah, good. You can control it. Knowing you have a limited role, Mayor, you're exactly right on showing up at City Hall. You don't have the run of the place, do you? Shouldn't. Our handbook in Sand Springs says elected officials have no greater access to public facilities than the public unless there's a meeting that's been posted. Probably have heard the line, I think Bill from OMAG, and he's on vacation this week and couldn't be here, he likes to use the line that you have a tremendous amount of power when you're in session and an agenda's been posted and you can vote on the things that are on the agenda. But once the meeting's adjourned, you get promoted back to citizen. And I didn't include it in this. I think we do have a list of the powers of city councils. There's a long list in statute. There is none for the individual council member. It's a blank page, and we've been using that in some places we go. Here are your individual powers. None. Because you have none. You don't have any power to come in and tell them what to do. You don't have any power to represent to the public, boy, we're gonna do this. And it is still amazing to me how many elected officials let ego take over for common sense. Because we still see that some. That
Short supply.
we did this training in a,
Common sense is in short supply.
we did this training for a city last year, and I had a councilman who said, no, I'm on duty 24/7. I am a 365-day-a-year elected city councilman, and I have the ability to show up on any job site. I have the ability to show up at the police department. I have the ability to show up at crime scenes. And I said, you have the same authority as the public, nothing more. Just didn't like that answer.
Very arrogant.
But
And that's hard to remember. I was having a discussion with one of you, and I can't remember who it was, but about the fact that when you guys can't show up at the fire station and walk in and go to an area that's not open to the public. Because.
Yeah, I mean, you were having that discussion.
Was it you? Okay, yeah.
It was over the sovereign citizen.
so,
The sovereign citizens, it was the First Amendment guys. That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah. So,
yeah.
but, and that's been an issue that I know David dealt with, is there have been places where cities, where elected officials, city councilors have had badges to badge into the building.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not okay.
Our handbook precludes it in Sand Springs because they don't want to operate.
Two now.
Because you get to decide. I mean, and that's the importance of the handbook is you're going to decide for a generation how you do business. And if they want to change it, they're going to have to vote to change it. There have been cities, though, where there are a number of cities in the Oklahoma City area in which the mayor has an office at City Hall in a city manager form of government. I don't understand how that
I
works.
don't either, but I understand.
That's one thing that I think a lot of citizens and people, they don't understand the form of government that your city has, whether your mayor's strong, commission's strong, but there's not a world where if you've hired a city manager and your commission's strong, that a mayor should have an office in City Hall.
We mix so many forms. We're doing some new training on just basic forms of government. We have about 120 city manager cities and over 400 town trustee forms of government. And then we mix into, and then aldermanic and strong mayor. And then amongst all of those 500 cities, 95 cities have a charter that may modify some provision of that form of government and change it some way, which just makes it difficult for everyone to be on the same page. For schools, we have one form of government in Oklahoma. For counties, we have one form of government. For cities, we have 4 plus charters that then can modify each of those 4 in some way if the voters approve it. And some cities have modified it drastically. But yours is, I think, the most efficient, the best city manager form of government should be the most efficient and best. It was designed to avoid things getting done by political influence, things being done based on reason.
It reminds me of the school board type system that,
Yeah.
schools in Oklahoma run by. There's not going to be a school board member walk into my classroom and tell me what to do.
Correct.
If they have an issue with that, they're going to talk to the superintendent first, and then it's going to go.
Schools historically have been more stable because they have 5-year terms and one person up every year. So it takes 5 years to have drastic turnover if one resigns.
Yes, it's hard to, I think sometimes it might be a little difficult for positive things to happen because I've just seen such a turnover. Justin's probably seen it more than I have, of commissioners,
Right.
being whatever, for whatever reason, or not carrying out another term, but I don't know.
You see below that, the staff responsibilities, and their job is very different than yours. We don't have a city planner in the room. I usually like to pick on the city planner because
Yeah, Bob's not here.
the city planner is usually the one that has the most difficult time accepting that council gets to decide on zoning and land use. They think they're right, well, they get to make a recommendation, but once the decision's made, it is the right decision by definition, right? Because you decided and you accept it as a staff member, you accept it and move on. So those duties are just different. I think that's important to look at. There's one other one I wanted to point out because we kind of hit on the immediate previous page. Some things are none of your business. And this is a slide we used to use. We would not have used it the last time we were here, but used to use it early years of training because I think it's important. I've dealt with every one of those situations. Public Works work sites where a board member shows up and tries to tell the Public Works employees how to do their job. We're circumventing the chain of command. It's not your job. It's none of your business. City Hall, you don't get a key to City Hall, just as we talked about. Traffic tickets, I've seen a council member get in some serious trouble over trying to intervene in traffic tickets. I used to tell the story that early in my career, my brother-in-law got a speeding ticket in a city I represented, and he called me and said, "Can you take care of this for me?" And I said, "Absolutely, I can fix it for you. Here's the name and number of the prosecutor. That's the extent of what I can do. You need to call them and take care of it." But that is your answer on a traffic ticket. Here's the name and number of our prosecutor. I have nothing else to do with it, and that should be the right answer. We've seen in some cities Which one? City manager, longtime city manager, lost his job over intervening in a traffic ticket for a council member. He seemed to forget it was on video. And newspapers and TVs have a lot of interest in those things when something like that happens. But a longtime city manager loses his job over a traffic ticket for a council member because he couldn't accept the notion, some things are none of my business. So some things are just none of our business, and that includes for the attorney. So my brother-in-law didn't like that answer, but well, I have nothing else to do with it. Personnel decisions are the most dangerous for the elected officials. Again, this is, I think, a slide I used the first time I did this training 15 years ago. I am always amazed, and I am still amazed in those cities in which elected officials want to get involved in day-to-day personnel decisions at council manager cities. It is easier for you to do your job when the person on the street says, what happened to my nephew Joe who got fired at the city? Why didn't you take care of that? The answer is, I have nothing to do with that. That's why we have a city manager, and it's none of my business. And the statute that is quoted in the materials is very clear. In a city manager city, it is none of your business. I am still amazed and we don't see this as much as we used to. I think when I first started this training, that was one of the big issues that we saw a lot, especially in city manager cities, and the meeting issues. I think we've gotten much better statewide if we've made any impact, it's, I think, on those two things. But you should be thrilled that there's a state statute that says you don't have anything to do with personnel. It is some of the worst stuff we deal with, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It just is. And having 5 of you involved in it is not going to make it better. It's hard enough already. You don't enjoy it, do you? Personnel issues? None of us do. It's hard, horrible work.
She's also the HR director.
Yeah, isn't it? It's hard, horrible work.
It is.
Be thrilled that you're not having, that state law says you can't be involved in it. You should be. But you didn't have to be, don't you?
I know, right?
I wish I didn't. I mean, we've all had horrible personnel issues we've had to deal with. And the answer from the public is, and I heard this from a council member just recently in a good-sized city, well, how am I supposed to explain to my constituent what happened with this employee if you won't tell me? How about telling them it's none of your business? You don't know and you don't care.
Personnel files are not subject to open records request.
We have a city manager in Oklahoma within the last 2 months who was terminated from employment because she refused to turn over personnel files to the elected officials.
That's a nunya.
It just is, isn't it?
I don't know.
Let me just tell you, I don't
have too much.
know anything about this, but my guess is that she made them fire her so she could get her severance package.
Yeah, they're now paying 2 city managers who are on severance. But council thought it was so important that, and I watched the video of the meeting, and I don't represent them, I was just curious, I'd heard about it. And the council person says, but I can't answer to my constituent what happened to little Johnny who got fired from the city, and I've got to be able to answer that. I get elected, you know. Sorry, there is an answer. It's none of my business. I don't know, constituent. Some things are none of my business. And should be thrilled that that would be one of them, I think.
I want a bumper sticker that says, I'm policy, not administration.
Yeah, it really is that simple.
Sorry.
I once had a mayor who showed up at a crime scene and told a young officer, I know these people, I'm going across the yellow tape and I'm going to take care of it. And he said, if you do, you will be arrested. I don't know who you are. And he said, but I'm the mayor. The officer said, it don't matter. It's not happening. The mayor goes to the city manager the next day and says, what are you going to do about this officer? The city manager says, promote him. Get his job. Anyway, those problems are avoided if we talk about them in advance and know what the problems are in advance. You guys are doing well and are on the right page. It's important to remind the new ones why and how you got to this point.
All right, David, whenever you're ready.
Can we have a moment for a break?
Sure.
Little take a deep breath, breather.
So don't write on it.
Huh? know that, right?
Oh,
Can we pause this?
These are your
Rachel,
Pardon me?
stop that.
items.
That's what I was just playing with. I'm not sure. I'm not,
okay.
I'm always afraid if I stop.
I don't mind if that's still running, I just didn't know. if-
Oh, yeah, stop that. Yeah. This one, I'm always afraid it won't start back up. Yes.
You know how to compare.
I think we can just take a recess. We don't have to vote. So
Yeah.
let's take a recess to whatever time it is.
Oh, no, that's last year. Am I doing it wrong? I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
wrong.
that's last year.
Okay, are
So-
any other lower issue than last year?
No,
No.
that's the lowest.
Yeah, they're all higher than last year. Okay. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
it's a good sign.
Trust my math after that. Oh, yeah, I think I can stand up. I need a cookie. I would have brought cookies. I just assumed Dennis would make us
you work
cookies.
here?
Only about 6 months.
How did that happen?
Well, last year, we hired a deputy city clerk, and it was not a great fit.
Well, it was just, they created the positions.
Yeah, brand new position. So it was not a great fit. That person resigned for a different position, and we had visited with her before, so
What do you think so far? Are you gonna be able to go to the clerks conference in October?
I'm not sure about that. We would like that, but we have to see if some things
Clerks have quite a
happening.
bit of training because there's two different clerks groups, one through ONL, one independent.
Oh,
The clerks and finance directors, and then the MC&T through
The
ONL.
OMC DFOA, that
That
one.
one's independent.
What's the other? And then that's
MC&T
ONL.
or something like that.
Probably.
It's the Municipal Clerks and Treasurers through ONL. And they each have training events that don't always align with each other, and some of their board overlaps, but not all.
Yeah, it's really confusing.
It is confusing.
And I've put in requests to OML that they change up what gets offered because they'll offer the same classes at the same sites. So
Yeah.
if you're going because you're trying to go to the closest one, like I've heard cash handling 5 times. So I've emailed and said, can we maybe move the classes around so that maybe the woodwork classes get offered in more?
right.
You know.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So, but anyway. So,
Good.
so first we
There's
did-
lots
she's
of
doing
clerks
great.
training available, so.
Yeah.
Did you handle municipal court also?
Not really.
They have another, if she's deputy
Oh,
city attorney as well, right?
Very minimally a few times,
Technically
but-
Tiffany is deputy, city clerk,
Yeah,
deputy
Tiffany is
city
the
clerk.
court clerk and the
Clerk,
deputy
clerk,
city clerk.
I don't. They hired Trevor Hammond, I've never heard of, who prosecutes, as far as I know, nowhere else. And is doing a great job. So,
Amy has taken on
Lives in Norman.
recently permits,
Excuse me.
building permits and
Oh.
contractor registrations. She has branched out into helping us
Good.
with that. So that's,
That'd be a good experience.
I told them that if I could have, I used to say this in Broken Arrow, if I could have filled, just designated a new position.
For what?
For the entire city, it would have been a contracts manager. Who actually, and she basically is the contracts.
The Holy Land.
But
That'd be a good trip.
such an important.
Same as a grants coordinator, I've always thought of.
and we need an IT person. I'm gonna tell you, that's the one that if I had a wish for just money to fall from the sky.
OMAG can help, OMAG will help you with IT. Call Kevin Seasock at OMAG.
I don't wanna do it, and it's part of my job.
So,
Here's the thing, I don't wanna.
they're setting up websites for some cities, they're really good.
I have a website. It's actually the security is my,
Oh.
and the making sure everybody does their updates and everybody this, including,
Yeah.
you know, all that day-to-day junk.
Dennis, let him know that I'm hungry.
Tell Dennis you're hungry.
Contracts that expire.
I'm very disappointed that there's no
Strong management of
Is
budgets is hard.
hungry.
Contract.
Just got back yesterday, so.
Insurance on that contract.
It was a really interesting conversation I had with that business owner.
Scary.
Yeah.
I was, it was really, all I said was, wow, you guys have grown. She just started in, and by that time, I just gave her my card. to have a
Okay, you want me to
conversation.
call them meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Amy's not back.
Oh, wait, okay. Well, then, I need to hear what you're saying up there.
I said, my voice carries. I thought. Thanks for the break, sorry.
No, that was good.
I'm sorry. Are you ready, Amy?
Okay. We never went off. Did we, are we getting an audio recording? Okay.
Okay. Ready to go?
Ready, let's go over your scores.
Oh, boy.
Amy's done the math. On finances, last time you scored a 7.56, now you're at an 8.71, which is consistent with what Rachel thinks you should be. It's a good sign. Governing body, you went from a 6.67, I think that kind of confirms what Justin would say, that you were at that level, now at 9.29. Again, a drastic improvement that been much better. Meetings were 5.67, now an 8.86. So really good progress in a short amount of time. Employees from 8.11 to 8.57. Public image from 6.13 to 7.21. Statewide, public image is the lowest. Every place we've been, every average we ever do. It's a hard one to deal with. We once had a work session in Sand Springs that dealt entirely with public image. What can we do as a group to help improve the image of the city? And it was really a lot of good input. That's where staff needs input from the elected officials. Really a way where you can make a difference to offer insight in how do we improve this. It'll get better if you work at improving it. It usually won't by accident, right? Crisis management, 7.67 to 7.79, so again, improvement. Economic development, 6.25 to 6.93. Another one we're gonna have to spend some time and work on it. What do you expect your role to be and how do you get there? And to me, it's been, if I were to write a book on the most enjoyable things I've worked on, I think economic development projects are the most fun because we see tangible results. And in both Manford and Sand Springs, we've been extremely aggressive in buying real estate. We no longer leave it to chance for other cities, for private side to do it. City actively. We did in Sand Springs a $6 million general obligation bond. The voters approved it for economic development. And within 2 months, we spent $6 million buying land. And public's pretty happy with it. We have a Chick-fil-A sitting on it, part of it. And I am convinced Chick-fil-A was so difficult to deal with that we would not have had it if it would have been left to the private sector. The city had a long-term interest in sales tax benefit, and it is a great addition financially. Take away whether you like the food or don't. It is the highest grossing restaurant in Sand Springs by far, because Chick-fil-A does so well. So from a financial standpoint, I just always have found it interesting to look at what's a McDonald's worth to you. As a city, what is it worth? What's a subdivision worth to you? Because there's a value to residential growth from an economic development standpoint. So anyway,
I have a question for you. This has been on my mind for quite a while. How do you move from one city entity that's not a part of the government that has typically been part of the economic development to now moving it to
who does it now?
not?
You don't contract with someone else to do it, I guess.
Economic development?
Yeah.
Right, we know.
It's up to you how aggressive you want to be with it. It really is. It's a policy decision for the board, limited by how much money you have and how you can find a way to do it and what you want to do. The video I left Tammy explains why Broken Bow got into it, and it's an interesting story. Vicki Patterson, their city manager, and she by herself is an interesting story because she used to be city clerk. Her first job with the city was working at the landfill, taking tickets for cars coming to the landfill. She's been city manager, I think, 8 or 10 years. I like her story because I have a connection to it by accident. She changed how they did economic development because she went to an OML conference, and Mike Nunley, who was in Manford, was the speaker. And I was there when he gave this presentation on how cities should do economic development. His was all about buying land. And she never met him, never talked to him, obviously never knew him. He died 4 or 5 years ago. But she went back to Broken Bow and tells the story. She went back to her city council and said, I just heard this presentation on how we should be doing economic development. What do you guys think about it? And they all said, that's stupid, we're not gonna do that. It took her a little bit of time to convince them. This picture you see of the worst, most dilapidated thing in the pictures, that was on the main road through Broken Bow. They went out and bought it. It was better to buy it and clean it up than let it sit. They're getting a new hotel on it. So her story of how they did that and how it took time to do it, takes getting everyone on the same page, it takes setting some goals. We've got statistics from Sand Springs and Manford. I can get them to Tammy. I think it's interesting. I did an economic development presentation at OML maybe within the last 6 months, and I really just focused on the statistics of it. What did we spend and what did we make? And we did when I first started in Sand Springs, they were committed to doing an urban renewal project south of the expressway. You see a Mexican restaurant, a steakhouse, a hotel, some of those things right off 412 going through Sand Springs. That used to be a dilapidated subdivision, mostly rental property, 180 different parcels. The city received basically a grant from Tulsa County to do whatever project they wanted to as a countywide sales tax. They decided to put theirs into that project. So and we just sold the last piece of property for that project just within the last couple months. They're starting building now. It took 20 years. We spent $20 million over 20 years. And we've now made $26 million selling land.
Not counting sales tax generated potentially.
Counting sales tax, counting utility revenue. We've got a breakdown of how much we've made on it. It was a long, difficult process. If we'd known when we started we were going to spend $20 million, they probably wouldn't have voted to do it. Looking back on it, everyone will say, boy, that's a great success. It just took 20 years.
And it does.
And it does. Bass Pro in Broken Arrow started in 2002, 2003 timeframe. It's not fully developed. The Lowe's just east of it, that started even before Bass Pro. They just sold a large parcel for retail development. So economic development, you gotta be in it for the long haul. You've gotta have the money to be involved. You gotta be willing to stick with it when people tell you it's stupid to be doing this. But Mike Nunley went out and bought 100 acres, got a new McDonald's, a new grocery store, a new bank, sold 20 acres. He bought it for $800,000. He sold 20 of the 100 for $850,000. City still owns 80. Sand Springs, we're doing a residential subdivision. They have a problem getting enough residential growth. You guys don't have that problem. You're booming with housing. Sand Springs has a problem attracting housing. City's building a 65-acre subdivision. Bought the land, putting in the roads, putting in the streets, utilities, and then we're gonna auction off the property, individual lots to builders. I think we'll make money on it. What business do we have doing that? None. But we hired David Charney of Owasso, who built more houses in Owasso than anybody, to be our consultant. And he said, I've never done this before. I build houses and subdivisions. Good, we'll pay you to be our consultant to help us do it, because we don't know what we're doing, but you do. So that's in the design stage. Hopefully it goes out for bid within the next 60 days for roads and utilities. There's no limit to what you can do other than what money you have and what political will you have. So that's one.
Do what?
And what staff you have.
And what staff you have. It's hard. I think it's the most rewarding work. I've just enjoyed doing those projects more than anything. Because you see tangible results.
So hasn't Broken Arrow had the same city manager for a long time?
about 8 years.
They went through 10 years in which they had 6 or 8. So they struggled for quite a while. Michael Spurgeon's now been there 6 maybe, something like that. 6 or 8.
I met him
That's helped.
at the mayor's conference
Yeah, it's
almost 10 years, between 6.
it's important to be on the same page because your staff is going to work to accomplish what you think is important to accomplish. And if it's not feasible, they're going to tell you it's not feasible. Right? You're limited by money and time and resources and what's available to you. I think Broken Bow is so unique because a city that size could do what they've done. We can all relate to that.
What's their population?
500?
They also, I mean, there is a tipping point where it's not it's not dilapidated enough for a city to go in and buy the land. Broken Bow, you could tell it was dilapidated enough that this was a feasible thing, but that in between can be really difficult.
One of the reasons you want to be financially stable, though, is so that you have money if opportunities come along. I mean, that really is a part of it, knowing there's a good opportunity and being able to do something about it. The worst scenario is a great opportunity comes along and you don't have any money. So, in Sand Springs, we budget money for the city manager to show up at the sheriff's sale and buy auction properties. That's budgeted every year now. He has, by ordinance, the authority to show up and bid on properties. And if there's something in Sand Springs that's on the sheriff's auction, you can go buy it. That's planning ahead and being ready. This year he didn't buy anything. Last year I think he bought a residential property. It was a good buy. And anyway, there are lots of creative things. I'll be curious your response to the Broken Bow video. It's probably too long, 5 minutes, but just an interesting approach. I think my whole point with that, you've made some improvement, but that's all going to be within your control of how you get better. And if, as a team, you work on how you get better at it and how you approach it with a long-term approach, you can do really well with that. Whatever you think is appropriate, you get to decide. There may be 3 of you who say, we shouldn't be in that business. That's fine. You get to decide.
There are scenarios, case studies that where cities have spent a whole lot of money getting a business to town that they'll never get back.
Oh, yeah, with incentives?
Incentives, yeah, and so you want to be smart with it. There may be times where you're going, yeah, no, we don't see that being in the best interest of the city.
I don't understand how cities do economic development projects and incentives when they don't own the land. Because somebody else is trying to make too much money on the deal usually.
We did one, but we maxed it out. And, we don't, when you're going to get this much benefit and that's it. But, yeah.
The greed factor.
We had a very good discussion that evening, I do believe.
It's a tough one.
My Mendel used to say economic development moves at the speed of greed. If the city were involved, he took the greed factor out of it. Moved at the speed he wanted it to move at. And there was a lot of truth to that. Your planning score went from 6.89 to 8.29. Again, very good improvement. Administration from 8.44 to 9.14. That's a good sign. Communication from 7 to 9. So all of those are really good. You're doing really well. But Tammy, I would do nothing to make it worse. That was my objective. Let's don't make it worse.
What was the total?
I don't know. You didn't tell me.
It's on there.
Oh, is it?
83.5 to
Upper 60s.
compared to 69.
Yeah, that's good.
Team,
3.8.
How do you sustain it? How do you make it better?
so we can.
So, questions, comments? I don't have anything else that I think is urgent for me to go over, so what advice would you give them? I think one of the things, one of the mistakes city councils make sometimes is not asking staff for their advice on just how they could get better at what they do.
I was thinking you doing what you're doing. I would encourage you to ask as many questions as you like. I mean, things that make perfect sense to me.
Has it become a better place to work since
Oh
the
my
board's
God.
gotten better?
Yes.
Will it be easier to keep a helper? I bet.
Yes. Yes. No, it's a much better place. And it, you know, we're talking about respect me. Last year, you put me on the spot. I'm gonna call you out.
Yeah.
Because everybody sat there like a lump on a log and said nothing. And he said, Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah.
So, thanks.
I did.
But I said,
I get to leave.
you said, you
Yeah,
asked
exactly.
me what I would want, and I said respect both ways. And so got my wish. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that.
Doesn't happen by accident. It only happens if we have the discussion and decide we want to do those things and agree that it's important, isn't it? So it's a credit to you guys that Justin listened, didn't you? And found it to be important.
I believe with all my heart that you have to be intentional. That nothing happens without forming a relationship with whoever you're working with. Whether you agree with them or not, I do believe that we have adults that we can agree to disagree, and we disagree all the time, or have different opinions. You have to be intentional with forming relationships and respect for everyone. And your personal agenda needs to stay away.
It is important to sustain it over time, and I would bet money that Justin will be more willing to stay and be a part of it with it operating the way it is now as opposed to the way it used to operate.
I was actually excited to do the score because I knew that we've improved. Some changes that's made to the commission. I was very excited to do it.
Good. Easier to show up and be a part of it, isn't it?
Yes, very much.
I just think that's important. Good.
Well, and
I'm glad you didn't get mad at me and throw me out.
that's tough. That's tough.
It is.
It was growth. It was growth.
You know, we never created the training to go to the difficult places. I used to say we train the good ones, not the bad ones, because the bad ones don't listen. The good ones will learn from it and work on it and get better. But there are some people, sometimes the only way to change some people is to change people.
People in the seat.
It just is. And get a good group, work well together, and we will retain a good group. And it is interesting. Manford, we have not had a contested election for city council in now 16 years.
How many people in Manford?
3,500. Sales taxes more than doubled during that period of time. City bought 91 lots in a failed subdivision. We've now sold all 91 and made money. And 91 new houses built because the city bought the failed subdivision that had been sitting vacant since the early 70s. Bought it in about 2000, so 10 years later, we've sold all 91 and made money in doing it, and 91 new houses built in a failed subdivision, besides the retail land they bought. But 16 years without a contested election. The business community is really happy with the city because when sales tax doubles, that means retail sales have doubled. And we focus a lot of times on how much our part goes up. If you convert it and look at how much their part went up, it went from about 20 million in annual sales to over 40 million in annual sales. Somebody's making good money, and that's a good thing.
Would you say that has happened because the term limits of the commissioners are longer, or the length of time that the team can stay together, or?
Well, they've had some turnover. They've appointed and filled those vacancies. The mayor has been a constant the entire time.
There's not a term limit for the mayor?
No, they don't have term limits in their town trustee form with statutory town trustee. They don't have a charter that sets limits. I think term limits overall have turned out to be not as good a deal as they are sold to be, especially in city. Stillwater used to have, what, 2 to 3 year terms? Wasn't that it, 6 years maximum? That's what you have?
That's what we-
You still have? Wow. Well, to sustain it over time, your jobs are much harder than it would be if you didn't have term limits. Can you set out 3 and then come back again?
That's,
City attorney's working on that.
that's a question.
That's interesting.
3 years is a long time to sit out and come back in.
I know. 6 years is a short term. I think. I mean, it takes several years to figure out what you're doing, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. It
Yeah,
does.
about the time you figure out what you're doing, I think your time is up the way it's set.
Yeah.
And things move slow.
They do. It just takes
It's
a
just
long
part
time.
of it.
You don't you? It's just like, you just kind of get your feet underneath you, and then it's like, oh, am I gonna do this for another 3 years, or?
And that's charter. It's been that way a long time.
Well, I've been here 9 years and it's been that way for the 9 years.
I think since they created it, they wrote it that way.
I know how I'd want to deal with it, but
Well,
That would just be my opinion.
We've had one charter amendment.
why don't you
And-
repeal the charter and be a city manager city? Statutory. Voters would have to do it, but
Not a bad idea. Actually.
I just think, and we've talked to the city attorney's group, most of our charters are very out of date. Most of them have provisions, most of them were adopted in the early 70s. We need a charter committee to write a modern charter that would help us get rid of some of those bad provisions, because, for example, in Sand Springs, we have a charter personnel board. They haven't met in 20 years. It's in the charter. If an employee feels like they were fired for political reasons, which hasn't happened in 20 years, they have the right to have a hearing before a personnel board. We appoint personnel board
When
members,
you need it.
and they haven't met in 20 years.
Well,
But that needs to go away.
Yeah,
I mean, it's-
well, and there are
That-
cities like Pawaso and Tulsa who regularly, on a schedule, revisit charter amendments, just
Right.
in general. And so the staff keeps track of, okay, when we come up to change the charter, there's this I'd like to change, and there's this, so that you're not having a charter amendment for one thing like we did. The whole process, it's not an easy process. So either do away with the charter or at least try to organize, let's look at the whole thing and see what we might
Correct.
want to change.
Not just one issue.
when you,
Yeah.
when you speak to us of, what are goals 10 years down the line,
It's hard to do. I didn't realize that.
it's hard to do. I mean,
I
even,
couldn't imagine our River West project in Sand Springs. It took 20 years. That type of revolving door of elected officials wouldn't have been very possible.
I'm not saying that
No.
I'm not making a commitment or an opinion on it. I'm just saying that anyone up here.
And then you still have to get reelected.
Right, correct.
But forcing someone out after 6 years who may be doing a really good job just doesn't make sense to me.
I kind of agree, it's hard to sit and commit to something for that long and out, but at the same time, when you have a good team that works together for the betterment of it, and I can see it being as almost a detriment. Okay, you served your time, you have to go.
Right.
And A, you might be enjoying it, and B, you're getting along with it, and
You're having tremendous success.
success doing it. I mean, I can see the,
Well, because they're going through strategic planning right now, and planning for 5 years and 10 years, I believe. Isn't that right? 5 and 10? And I mean, it's hard to plan for 10 because,
That leads straight into our lowest score. When you look at the strategic planning that we're going through, that's one of our lowest scores. It includes economic development. It includes, stabilizing infrastructure. And I'm just not as new as they are, but almost. And it's just like learning and getting your feet underneath you and, understanding everything that's in front of you. asking a million questions.
I don't know, we have some, Broken Arrow, for example, is a statutory council manager form, they don't have a charter. I actually think the statutory forms of government for town trustee and council manager are pretty good outline of how we should operate. Town trustee is interesting because it has the greatest flexibility. Medford has chosen to operate as a city manager form of government. They're a town trustee form, but the statute says they can create whatever other departments are necessary to operate the city. That can be a city manager form. So they've done that as a town trustee form. So it's just interesting.
Okay, that's for cities smaller than,
There's some statute on
I think
the
we're
board.
small enough, but yeah.
But you can be a council manager.
Oh, definitely.
Our population,
Actually, we are.
like, even with Manford,
No, it's like 3205, I think is what it was, so yeah, right.
we're like right above them,
They're 35, I think.
35, they're okay.
Yeah.
I knew we were like right there together.
Well, and one of the things that I think that, and we've talked about this, and that you can do, that I think you should do in preparation for being prepared for economic development opportunities that come to you, is not just having the money and the organization, but having the comprehensive plan that sets out your city and what's gonna grow where, and so that you have a big idea of where, okay, the donut shop comes to town, where might we want them to go?
Right.
You
Where do
know,
want to be commercial?
and maybe do the overlay for downtown so that there's rules that, and that might make certain businesses feel more inclined to come downtown. So that's part of having something like that in place, is part of, I think you see the businesses, you're already seeing businesses that are attracted to Perkins for different reasons, but if they see that you've also got a good plan as a city, that may be where they want to go.
Which we're working
Infrastructure.
on. We've got-
And the infrastructure,
We've
yeah.
got the comprehensive plan in progress.
Right, and we do have a grant from, I guess it's a grant or an agreement with OU to do the comprehensive plan. We need to step that up. I've thought about that. Not that I need to be involved in
Is that
that.
the OU OSU comprehensive plan thing that they were at the,
I think it's just
Church.
OU, isn't it?
Well, but OSU came in on like a piece of it.
They did?
Yeah, it's been months. I
They were
don't
all-
remember what it was, but that
was
was.
that two separate things?
I think it was like a piece. It was the comprehensive plan, but then there was like a part of it that OSU was partnering with OU on.
And I think Tammy's right. I think we need to look into that again, because those students were very fired up about their booths, and the interaction that they had was really good. Their ideas were great. The questions that they had were very pertinent to what was going on. They seemed to have done their research about our city. There
My
wasn't.
impression is it paused because school's out.
That's
When
my
was that,
understanding.
Mayor?
Do what?
When was that?
It was in February.
Okay, good.
It was a little chilly outside.
It was toward the end of February, if I remember.
Yeah. It wasn't, it was open to the city. Any citizen could come, but there really wasn't very many that were there. But I think that, from what I've seen, the interest in the city has grown. The communication between staff and the citizens have gotten better, just between newsletters. By the way, that newsletter was great. Very well written. And then just the usage of social media, and then commissioners sharing it to their pages, and I've seen improvement there, I think. And
It's like a good thing to show other cities.
That's true. We're only doing a quarterly one because that's all advantage, but.
I mean, you know, I need to put that back out there, but the emails, the text messages I get from the city on the alerts of everything, that is a very cool service that we offer to our citizens. And all you have to do is go on the city webpage and sign up for it, and I get it on my phone, and then I'll also get an email
Get it
alert.
on text.
Like today was municipal court.
Yeah, that's the calendar.
You can choose what you want to sign up for and what you don't. It's real easy to do.
Tell all your friends. That's the kind of thing though, really, if you all would help share to your own personal pages, things that we put on the City of Perkins Facebook page, that helps our reach. Because we don't, you know, Facebook algorithms, we might have 400 people following
Correct.
the page, but then Facebook only shows it to 40. So any time that you can share things on your personal page just to help reach folks in town, that would be really helpful.
And you can
Or
tell,
on your city commissioner page that's separate from your personal page.
Cities do a horrible job of getting the good news out, so it's great that you're doing it.
Yeah, we tried really hard.
we've had, there's been great response. Eric,
No, but yeah,
Eric's been keeping up with the emergency management and the tree pickup, so you tell him kudos.
I will.
Because he's done a great job of updating, sending things out, and there have been, probably in the last couple days, more compliments to the city from contracting with D&D and picking up debris that people just couldn't handle. I know that there was some grumbling and all I would tell people would be like, it's in the process, there's a process here. But there's been a lot of positive comments to city staff for tree removal by D&D, and today was one of them, was how efficient they were, and they just got it done. And so
I think Jason hit the nail on the head when he said things just move slowly, and
They
people
do.
don't realize that we have to talk to the Department of Environmental Quality and get a permit before we can start collecting stuff, before we can burn. I mean, so there's all, and when there's that type of a storm, everybody's talking to DEQ
Right.
asking for a permit.
and that's why I appreciate you and Bob and how you communicate with us, because if a citizen asks a question, I can answer it. And it's not a political thing. It's not I'm not stepping out of my role. I can answer a question for you about the city. And not necessarily shut them down, but just calm them down a little bit and say, it's in the process. Just give it some time. Stay on the website, get information from there. And I just think Eric has done a great job with the communication on that. So,
Well, hopefully you've made it a better place to work for Bob, because the first time I came here, he was a lot of attention. And I suspect he does a whole lot better job now than he did then.
Yes.
Because the job is better and easier.
It's a better place to work, period. I mean, everybody read it on Facebook and heard it and saw it, everyone. So it's a much better place to work.
Any questions of me? Whatever you want to ask, we will try to answer or make up something. I don't know, it's interesting. It seems like we've seen almost everything. I think I've counted a number of 2,500 city council meetings by now. That seems like a lot.
I don't think it seems like a lot. That is a lot.
And every time I think,
sorry. Just tell it how it is, man.
every time I think I've seen everything, something new comes up. I saw within the last month a motion to suspend the rules. What rules are we suspending, which caused some animosity with someone, but I didn't understand. I've never heard of that. I don't think certain rules we can't suspend.
I know he is.
Unfortunately.
I do what I want.
The Open Meeting Act, we can't suspend that rule. Anyway, every time I think I've seen everything, I see something new and different that's interesting.
I just want to say thank you for coming to share your wisdom.
Oh, thanks for having me. I am convinced cities can be successful if they have the right path to get there, and it has always frustrated me that we see bad government by choice. We can do better, and you guys should enjoy it. I mean, you should be selfish about it too. What can we do to make this a good experience for all of us? Because if you do that, you'll make good decisions and your city will get better. And it's hard to do. It's hard to get to that point sometimes, isn't it? How many years was it a bad place you were?
Really, only about 18 months. I mean, I at some point in the midst of that, I said, you know, I really looked forward to city commission meeting nights. I enjoyed them. It was nice to go and say, here's what we're doing, what do you want us to do, how do you direct us, you know? And then it became where
But I told David recently, I said, one of the things that the staff has learned, I think, is that happens in cities. That you can go through a time where because you don't pick the elected officials, and you have to deal, and they're so well run that there are times when I've said, she'll call me about something and I'll say, well, what did you do last time this happened? And she said, just because the answer is be consistent, let's be consistent. And she'd say, well, it's never happened. And I remember saying to her one time, you are not a normal city. Because this thing happens.
Right.
And so that's been part of
But
it,
we
I
learned
think.
too on where we can also draw the line.
Right.
There are times when I didn't know that I had the power to say, I am sorry, you are stepping on the line. And now I know I can do
I
that.
think everyone involved learned a lot from that process, and it was not necessarily a bad thing. It's hard,
Yeah.
but not necessarily bad.
Challenge is how to sustain it now. I think it can be for a long period. James has been staying. Same Springs has been. I don't think those are just accidents. I think it's been through hard work.
Well, and David said last year in one of the meetings that the kind of meeting that you want to have is one that's so boring that the public don't show up. And I think, I don't know that I think it's really
You
important.
didn't necessarily agree, but it's an important point.
No, I do kind of agree, but I think the point too that you're making is you want to have well-run meetings so that the show-off who comes to get their say in every time doesn't bother to come, because they don't get more than their 3 minutes or whatever, and what I've found is the painful meetings for me are the ones that are not controlled by the mayor. Those are the it hurts so bad.
It does.
And they last so long, and I get ugly, and then I have to quit. So I really appreciate that we have well-run meetings.
I came up with that because I was asked to represent a town that the assistant DA called me and said, they don't have an attorney. They've decided they have so many people coming to their meetings, they lock the doors to keep them out. And I'm gonna have to prosecute them unless they get some help to solve it. So I go to the first meeting and it's standing room only and horrible. And the mayor says, how are we gonna solve this? And I said, we're gonna make it so boring, nobody in their right mind is ever gonna wanna come to your meetings, because our work should generally be boring. Important to us, but not important enough that it's the Jerry Springer show, which is what theirs had become, the Jerry Springer show. And there is an element of society that loved the Jerry Springer show, right? And if you make that your city council meeting, they'll all show up and they'll enjoy it. And they'll think it was a great show. Everyone remember the Jerry
I
Springer
really
show?
appreciate it.
Not the father.
That's right.
She said you were not the
There is an element of Perkins who would love for you to do that at every council meeting. Right? You could draw a crowd to it behaving that way. Anyway, that was my point to him. We're gonna make it so boring. They're not gonna-
Right.
And it should be a business meeting. So,
Rachel, I've heard said that sometimes you can look back and you can thank God, or you can call the troubles and the stress that you went through, you can eventually call it a blessing because of what you learned. Sometimes if you don't go through those hard times, like Tammy said, if you don't go through those hard times, you don't know what the good times look like. So I respect you immensely in what you do, and I just hope and pray that good times will stay around for a little bit, because you are worth your weight in gold, and you've been underappreciated for way too long, and so has your staff, which they have a great sense of humor as well.
You're pretty funny.
Well, and just to note too, on the employees, one person, and I don't know who it was, wrote it down, wrote a lower score than it seemed they would have, and made the note, need better pay. So, I think that's,
Good long-range goal.
and I know you all have that, and I think that affects the rating.
I mean, it was me, I'll tell you, it was me.
Oh, was it
And
you?
it has to do with the retention.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
great people, but it's hard to keep them when they can go someplace else and make $3, $4, $5 more an hour. It's a lot of money.
And I'm proud of this team for being able to put in a small step forward. And I look forward to more sales tax where we can hopefully do more. Staff.
Not contract labor.
Oh my gosh.
Get it right?
Rachel made it funny.
Tammy, I think.
Hey,
bless your
Tammy, I didn't get one either. We didn't get a raise either.
Right.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and keep in mind OMAG is a tremendous resource for all of us. That's who I call when I need help. Is the legal staff there is tremendous, and they just have a lot of resources. It's not a normal insurance company because they don't have a profit motive, so you name it. They just have a history of having great staff people at OMAG, so it's been great to work with them.
Thank you so much for
And
coming.
if y'all don't want to have a motion to adjourn, you don't have to.
It's the enhanced power of the mayor to adjourn a meeting. You didn't know you had so much power.
Amy, I make a motion that we adjourn tonight's special meeting.
Oh, hold on.
I'll second it.
Ooh, we had to beg for a second.
All right, Mayor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sarah. Yes. Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I really want to adjourn.
I didn't know if it was Justine's turn or my turn.
Oh, that's funny, it started at 6:00.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're right.
Oh,
I do. Or she does.
Do I need to sign that, or I don't need to sign anything tonight, do I?
No, thank you.